I had never heard such helplessness in a mother's cry in my life. But that night, the sound that came crashing down from the walls of the maternity ward did not sound human. It was no ordinary night. The sky was strangely dark, as if even the moon had closed its eyes and slept. Doctors were running. Nurses were silent when they saw each other. The lights in the labor room were blinking repeatedly, as if trying to hide something. And then, a scream, and silence. What is this? The doctor's hands began to tremble. The nurse stepped back. The baby had been born. But instead of being closed, its eyes were wide open, straight to the ceiling. Its skin color was as if it were centuries old. As if it had emerged from the dust, but alive. And the scariest thing, the baby had smiled as soon as it was born. Yes, a smile that didn't look human. The mother closed her eyes as soon as she saw the baby. I don't want this. This can't be my baby. She screamed, stood up crying, and left the ward. Her name was not written in any register. No address, no heirs, nothing. Just a code number, N13, and a file that read, Unusual birth, identity unknown. The doctor moved the baby to a corner ward, where no one usually goes. And there the baby lay awake all night. Her eyes were fixed on the ceiling, as if she were watching someone, or remembering someone. It had been 24 hours since N13 had been lying in the corner of the hospital. No mother came, no relatives. Only the nurse, Hansla, who had a strange look of fear on her face, and she kept saying, "This child breathes, but as if empty inside." That night the hospital lights suddenly went off. Then the emergency alarm rang. The nursing staff started screaming. The first thing the supervisor saw in the CCTV room was this. N13 was not in his bed. A search began all around. ICU wards, storerooms, everywhere. But the child was missing, as if the ground had swallowed him. Then a nurse felt something, cold, strange chill. And the door to the neonatal room opened. Everyone screamed as they entered the door. The child was sitting there by himself, on the floor, waving a small hand. All around him, the newborns were fast asleep. But one thing made everyone shudder. Every child was lying upside down, as if someone had turned them all over. N13's eyes were still fixed on the ceiling, but there was once again the same smile on his face, the same unknown, inhuman smile. A hospital meeting was called. The chief surgeon said, "This child will go to the orphanage. This is beyond the hospital's control." Nurse Hansla asked hesitantly, "What if he's not really human then?" The doctor said only, "So remember, there are some creatures whose bodies look human, but they are something else." The next day, an ambulance left from the back gate of the hospital. A cold, silent baby in a wooden cradle, wrapped in a small blanket, headed for the orphanage. But the ambulance driver only said one thing on the way back. "I felt like that kid was watching me. The whole way, his eyes kept piercing my back." When the ambulance stopped at the orphanage door, a strong gust of cold air opened the door automatically. The staff inside saw the child, small, silent, wrapped in a white blanket, and the scariest thing, his eyes were not closed. The chief caretaker, Amna Khatun, who had been the orphanage's caretaker for the past 30 years, immediately said, "This child does not look ordinary." The youngest nurse on the staff room laughed. "Hey Amna, you call every child possessed. This child is just a little different." But there was something else in Amna's eyes. Fear, and at the same time some old pain. They immediately put the child in the very last room of the orphanage, which was locked, where there were no other children. Nighttime. The entire orphanage was silent. But that last room, the sound of a child's laughter was coming from there. A child who is all alone. Why is he laughing? And that laughter didn't sound like a small child's. Amna peeked through the crack in the door. N13 wasn't on the bed. He was sitting on the floor in a circle. The circle that someone had made with blood. "Oh my God!" Amna stepped back, closed the door and locked it from the inside. She immediately went to her room, opened an old drawer, and took out a book from inside. Very old, full of dust. A Turkish word was written on the book. Lanet lenmiş doğum, meaning cursed birth. She said in a trembling voice. No. This is the same child, the one who was mentioned. N13. This is the same number. In the morning, Amna Khatun was the first to unlock the door. She entered, reciting Ayatul Kursi in her heart. The child was now in bed. Calm, quiet, as if nothing had happened during the night. But there were small spots of blood under the bed. And a line written with a finger on the wall of the room. Ben geldim. Translation: I have come. This sentence. A child of this age cannot write. But the writing was so fresh, as if it had just been written. That evening, a stranger appeared in front of the orphanage. An old man wrapped in a long cloak, a cane in his hand. He said, I know who has come here. Let me see the child. The staff hesitated, but Amna allowed him in, because the old man's face was so calm, as if he could read the time. He went in. The door to the room closed. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. 15 minutes. Then he came out and just said one sentence. This child is not human. He has come to take account. And he left without saying another word. Amina trembled. She called Romy and said, From today on you will take care of this child. Romy said in surprise, Me. But Mom. You used to say it was a curse. Amina replied softly, Some curses are a mirror of our sins. Maybe now is the time for us to look in the mirror. Romy hesitantly picked up the child in his arms. And for the first time N13 closed his eyes and took a deep breath, as if some nameless pain had found momentary relief. As Romy picked up N13, he felt as if a silent lightning had touched his body. The child smiled slightly, then immediately closed his eyes. And for the first time that night he slept. But it was no ordinary sleep. It was a dream, or perhaps an old door, opened for the first time in years. In the dream, he finds himself standing in a large palace, the walls of which are gold but stained with blood. A woman is screaming in the middle of the palace. Don't bring him here. The curse will return. Her hair is disheveled, blood stains on her clothes, and a swinging baby in her arms. Just then a long-bearded man appears, in royal robes, and says, This child is not of our race. This is punishment. Bury him. The child stands far away, watching everything. And suddenly the woman turns and stares at him, straight into the eyes, as if the child is there, not in a dream but in reality. She shouts, Sinanul tekrar karşılaşacağız. We will meet again. The child opens his eyes in a panic. He is drenched in sweat. Only Rome is sitting in the room, reciting the Quran. N13's breathing is getting faster. Roma quickly brings water. Did you have a dream? The child cannot speak, but his eyes want to say something. As if he has realized for the first time that he is not an ordinary child. A page of the Quran in Roma's hand moves. And a verse lights up. And whoever fears Allah, Allah makes a way out for him. Roma is surprised. She runs to Amina and tells her everything. Amina is silent for a while. Then she says, It is time for us to find the dervish who came last time. Perhaps he can tell us what this child is the heir to. The next day before sunrise, both Romy and Amina set out in search of the dervish who had come earlier and said, This child has come to take account. They were told that he lived near an old monastery, where there was a deserted hut on the bank of the river. When they reached there, the dervish was sitting on the ground, chanting, eyes closed, lips moving, and a light on his face that shone even in broad daylight. Romy said, We want to know about the child you saw. N13. The dervish opened his eyes. He said slowly, That is not my dream, it is your account. And his secret is buried in the box that his mother had left. Amina's eyes widened. What is that box in the hospital? The dervish nodded in agreement. The three of them immediately went back to the hospital. In the old store, where redundant files, garbage and abandoned items were thrown away, an old iron box was found. Rusty but locked. Darvish recited a prayer and opened the lock. Inside was a parcel wrapped in cloth, which contained an old photo, a young woman in the general ward of the hospital, smiling, a letter soaked in blood, and a small ear-sized print, perhaps of a newborn, but strangely elongated. Darvish read the letter, and his face began to change. This letter, his mother wrote it herself, in blood. The letter read, "If anyone reads this letter, then know, I have paid the price for my sin. I longed for children I did an act whose cost I did not know. I pledged the soul of a newborn, and in return I received a child. But that child was not human. He was from someone else. If he lives, he will return one day and take everyone. Don't wake him, let him sleep, or bury him." Rome's eyes filled with tears. Amna stood still. And Darvish said softly, "This child is not yours. It is a mirror of your sins. And the mirror will not break until the truth is revealed." In the next episode, N13 is sent to learn from the imam of a local mosque, but the imam's condition gradually begins to become strange, as if he is possessed by someone else. Far from home, N13 was sent to teach spiritual lessons in an old but beautiful mosque. The mosque was in an ancient city in Turkey where every stone tells a story. The imam of the mosque, whose name was Husayn Pasha, was a determined and gentle man. He found a special comfort in his teachings and prayers that calmed people. N13, who was now about 75 years old, quietly entered the mosque. There was a hint of anxiety in his eyes, as if he was searching for some great secret within himself. Husayn Pasha welcomed him warmly and immediately attracted him to spiritual lessons. For the first few days everything seemed normal. N13 prayed daily, listened to the recitation of the Quran, and remained silent as an Amin. But soon some strange events began to occur. At night, whispers suddenly broke the silence in the peaceful courtyard of the mosque. Sometimes it felt as if someone was contributing to these prayers. Husayn Pasha's way of standing changed. Even after the morning call to prayer, a sadness would fill his eyes, as if he were weighed down by a burden. One night N13 was sitting alone in his room when the door suddenly opened. Husayn Pasha came in, chanting nameless words. His face turned dark for a moment, and there was a lifeless note in his voice. "You must immerse yourself in spiritual light, otherwise this curse will come alive again." N13 did not understand what the imam wanted to say. A question arose in his heart that perhaps he himself was part of the same darkness that the letter in the box had first described. The next morning, Imam Husayn Pasha read a page of the Quran over and over again, but the words that came from his lips sounded like the voice of another world. Some of the elders in the mosque also felt that the imam's behavior had changed, as if he had been possessed by some unknown spirit. N13 watched everything silently, but deep down he felt a deep fear. He wanted to know if these changes were predetermined before his arrival or if there was some other reason. Was this imam truly the spiritual guide who would bring him peace, or was this also part of the curse that was hidden in his being? The echo of the sounds, silence and recitation of the mosque was now a new proof that there are some matters that cannot only be expressed in tongues but must also be understood from the depths of the heart. N13's heart was now entangled in daily prayers and meditation. But the more he turned to Allah, the more dark lines began to cling to his being. His fingers would often become uncontrollable, as if they were trying to write something in another language which he himself did not know. One night, he was sitting in the mosque's chamber, listening to the recitation of the Quran. It was raining lightly outside, and the courtyard was silent. Then suddenly, a loud noise, as if someone had slammed the large door of the mosque shut. But when Romy, who now lived with him, came out, the door was open. A strange light came into N13's eyes that night. He simply said one sentence without looking at Romy. "They are coming." Romy asked nervously. "Who?" N13 said something for the first time, something that no human could do. "Those who created me are speaking, they are speaking inside me." That same night, 3 children were found mysteriously unconscious outside the village. There were no wounds on their bodies, but their eyes were constantly open, and they were repeating only one sentence. "Bizo Bakti." He looked at us. Imam Hussein Pasha had now left the mosque. People said he had gone to a shrine outside the city. Some said he had gone mad. But only Rome knew the truth. He knew. N13's existence was no longer silent. The power that had been locked inside him for years was now awakening. When she entered his room that night, N13's body was slightly suspended in midair, as if he were floating in the air a few inches above the ground. Her eyes were closed, but her tongue was moving. "Ben. Laintin Kirilma Sozuyum. I am." The beginning of the curse's breaking. Roma touched his forehead with trembling hands, and fell back with a jolt, as if someone had electrocuted her. The question now was not who was that child, but rather, what had he become now? Where N13 sees the roots of his past for the first time, a truth hidden in a dream, a woman's scream, and that door that doesn't open for everyone. Episode 9. Story continues. N13 now had the same dream every night. A huge palace burning. Flames were shooting from the walls and doors. The palace had a gold floor, but ashes scattered all over it. And amidst the ashes a woman, dressed in white, crying, screaming, kept calling out the same name. "Ibrar. Ibrar. Who is this?" The child, N13, approaches him in the dream, and the woman looks at him and shouts, "Why did you come back? We buried you." Then a large door appears. Black, made of stone, and engraved on it in some language that N13 doesn't understand. But its meanings resonate in his heart. Jekmes Afetmes. The past does not forgive. The door slowly opens, and a black light comes out, as if the darkness is alive. At that moment, N13 wakes up with a scream. The whole room is cold. The windows are closed, but the wind is blowing in. Romy opens the door and runs in. "Are you having the same dream again?" She already knew that this was no ordinary dream. These are memories. That same day, N13 decides to find the truth about the woman and the palace she saw in her dream. Amna takes out an old photo, which she found with N13 in her clothes when she was a child. The photo shows a young woman and behind her the same palace, the one that was burning in the dream. This palace is far from the city, in a deserted place behind the mountains. Romy says, "Can you take us there? Are you okay?" N13 doesn't speak, just nods. The next morning, the 3 of them set off in an old jeep on this journey. Towards the truth, towards that palace of fire, where N13's truth is buried. The journey was long. On the way, desolate mountains, dry trees and old graves, as if everything was watching silently, and waiting for someone to return. When the jeep stopped at the place where the burning palace had appeared in the dream, there were only ruins, ash, burnt stones and some broken walls. But the atmosphere was the same, heavy, suffocating. N13 moved forward slowly. He came to a certain place and stopped, as if his feet knew where to go. Suddenly a cold wave passed, and a whisper echoed in the air. "Finally, you have returned." N13 turned around, but there was no one around. Then a puff of smoke emerged from the middle of the ruins, and in it appeared the image of a woman. White dress, long black hair, moisture in the eyes, and the same name on the lips. "Ibrar." 13 stood still. The woman said, "I am your grandmother, your mother's mother, and you are the last heir to this curse." Romy and Amina stepped back, as the air grew heavier. The spirit continued to speak. "Our race is cursed, of 7 generations. You are the 7th, the last. Your mother obtained you through a spiritual process, and the price of that process was an innocent soul. But that soul returned, in your body. Tears welled up in N13's eyes for the first time. You were born to either complete this curse, or break it. But remember, the day you touch the truth, your heart will belong to someone else. Then the smoke slowly began to dissipate. If you want to know the truth, then find your mother now. She is the one who can tell you the rest of the secret. If she is alive. N13 stood silent and only said, I have to find the woman who gave birth to me, and then abandoned me. His steps were quickened now, as if the power within him was pushing him to find some hidden secret. He decided that he would find his mother, the woman who had given birth to him, and then abandoned him. This was his last link to reality, and he had to find his mother to uncover the truth of that link. Romy and Amina were behind him, but fear was in their hearts. If you can find your mother, can you bear this truth? Amina said, but there was no hesitation in N13's eyes. Whoever I am, I want to know. A few days later, they arrived at a small village where N13's mother, Khadija, was said to be hiding. The village was quite far from the city, and getting there was no easy task. But when they reached the village, it was a new scene. The village streets were silent, and people were looking down, feeling a strange fear. Amna asked a village elder about Khadija. Khadija. The elder gritted his teeth, and then said softly, Is she your mother? If you want to know the truth, you shouldn't look for her. The woman who gave birth to you is now paying the price with her own life. Then, as a cold wind blew, the elder said, She never came back after the hospital, and whoever survived after that day was no longer human. N13, suppressing his heartbeat, headed towards an old house outside the village. The house was ordinary to look at, but everything was different once he entered. Khadija once again was hiding behind that door. She appeared, like the woman she had seen in her dreams, but now old, frail, and with streaks of silver in her hair. There was a deep question in N13's eyes. Are you my mother? Khadija raised her head and asked a new question. Why did you come back? I left you so that you could escape that curse. Then Khadija said, You know, your birth was the biggest sin of my life. I created you because I was promised something to save from the world, but I paid the price myself. Now you have to decide what to do. That silent moment, when the eyes of mother and son met. It was as if two eras had collided. There was a strange nobility on N13's face, as if she was ready to listen to any answer, no matter how terrible. Khadija said softly, I was infertile since childhood. I was told you could never be a mother. I tried every medicine, every treatment, every prayer. Then she bowed her head. And then one day, a woman came to me. In black clothes without any shade, and with no light in her eyes. She said, If you want your womb to be filled, you have to trade for an innocent soul. I agreed. Rome's eyes filled with tears. And 13 was still silent. 9 months later you were born. And you were not ordinary. You didn't cry, you didn't scream. You were just watching as if you knew everything. And when you were born, a shadow was born with you, which only I could see. It was around you all the time and kept telling me the count. 1, 2, 3, 7. 7. Those were the 7 lives, whose sacrifice was necessary after this act. You were born, but that promise was yet to be fulfilled. Sweat broke out on N13's forehead. Khadija cried and said, That's why I left you. I thought maybe, if you stay away from me, the curse would also stay away from you. But I was wrong. The curse is tied to you, like a shadow is tied to light. N13 simply asked, So was I born to take 7 lives? Khadija shook her head. Or you can be the one to end this chain. But the price could be your own life. Something stirred inside N13. A light, a pulse, a decision. That silent moment, when the eyes of mother and son met. It was as if 2 eras had collided. There was a strange nobility on N13's face, as if she was ready to listen to any answer, no matter how terrible. Khadija said softly. I was infertile since childhood. I was told you could never be a mother. I tried every medicine, every treatment, every prayer. Then she bowed her head. And then one day, a woman came to me. In black clothes without any shade, and with no light in her eyes. She said, if you want your womb to be filled, you have to trade for an innocent soul. I agreed. Rome's eyes filled with tears. And 13 was still silent. 9 months later you were born. And you were not ordinary. You didn't cry, you didn't scream. You just watched as if you knew everything. And when you were born, a shadow was born with you that only I could see. It was around you the whole time and kept counting to me. 1, 2, 3, 7. 7. Those were the 7 lives that had to be sacrificed after this act. You were born, but that promise had yet to be fulfilled. N13's forehead was covered in sweat. Khadija cried and said, that's why I left you. I thought maybe, if you stay away from me, the curse would also stay away from you. But I was wrong. The curse is tied to you, like a shadow is tied to light. N13 simply asked, so was I born just to take 7 lives? Khadija shook her head. Or you be the one who ends this chain. But the price could be your own life. Something began to stir inside N13. A light, a heartbeat, a decision. If I am the end of all this, then I don't want that revenge. I want forgiveness. I want to be the one who ends the curse, not spreads it. Khadija hugged him for the first time. And that moment was perhaps the first human moment in both of their lives. That night, when he first found his mother's lap, N13's sleep descended to a new depth. He was no longer in a dream. He was in another world, where time, light and sound all stood still. 7 shadows stood before him, each shadow equal to him but empty inside, as if they were just shadows without bodies. They had no eyes but they could see. They had no lips but they could speak. And they said, you were born with us, N13. You cannot refuse to return us. We are your strength, your identity. You are not our end, our door. 13 took a step back. But a light came out of his body, white, warm and powerful, like the light of his mother's embrace, like the shadow of Romi's prayers, like the truth of Amina's eyes. He said, I am your birth but not your inheritance. If my being has carried the burden of sins, then today I have come to remove that burden. The shadows screamed, and each shadow moved towards him one by one. But his body was now suspended in the air. And from his tongue came, do not fear, for I am with you. The Quranic power had become his shield. The first shadow dissolved into light. The second turned to screaming ash. And as they fell one by one, N13's eyes grew calm. But the last shadow, the largest, the darkest, came closer to him and said, you can kill us, but you cannot kill yourself. You are now us, and we you. N13 remained silent. Then he placed his hand on his chest and looked up at the sky. If there is darkness within me, then give me light, or else take my life, so that this world may be saved. Then, the clouds in the sky split for the first time, and a white lightning struck his being. The ground shook. Mother screamed, Rome ran out, Amina fell in prostration. But, when everything stopped, N13 was lying on the ground, eyes closed, body still, and only one sentence on his lips. I sent them back. That night, which was only a moment on earth, in the spiritual world it was as long as centuries. N13 lay unconscious on the ground. Rome sat beside him, tears in her eyes, a single prayer in her heart. Oh God, if he really fought for you, then bring him back. Amina had closed the door. The villagers were still trembling, because the entire sky had been filled with white light that night. But N13, he was in another world now. He was standing in an open field. No night, no day. No earth, no sky. Just light, silence. And a voice. You refused and won. But now the question is, of your own fate. N13 looked up at the sky. Can I stay? The voice said. You paid the price for your sins, understood the truth of your existence, and saved others. But your existence is now pure, and ready to write a new chapter on this earth. Then the light took on a body, a luminous figure. The face was in a fog, but the heart knew. This is an angel. The angel said, Go back. You still have to guide some people. You are not just a curse. You are a sign for all those who do not consider themselves free from the burden of sins. That moment, N13 lying on the ground began to move. Romy screamed. He is awake. N13's eyes slowly opened. But this time there was no silence in them that had been there for years. This time there was peace in them, there was light. He spoke softly. I'm back. But I'm not the one you all knew. I'm not just alive. I'm free. Amina prostrated. Rome's tears flowed, but this time they weren't of fear. They were of peace. From the hospital to the ruins. From the box to the dervish. From the curse to forgiveness. And N13's journey was now complete. He was alive with a new identity now. Neither those shadows were behind, nor the burning palace in his dreams. Just him, Romy, Amina, and a simple decision. Where I began, a new light must begin for others. He repopulate the same old orphanage. Now he himself became the guardian of the children, whom the world had abandoned, just as he had been abandoned. Every night he would tell these children stories. But the story was never his own, because he wanted his life to be a lesson, not a legend. One day Romy asked, Do you still have any fear in your heart? And N13 looked up at the sky and said, No, the curse is over. I have forgiven myself. Now all that remains is the light. That same night, the same nurse who had been on duty at the hospital years ago came to the orphanage with a letter. The letter contained only 3 words. N14 is born. N13 looked at Rome. A faint smile appeared on her lips, and a strange light flashed in her eyes. So does it never end? Or maybe every generation has to pass its own test. And the camera zooms out. A new child, a new file, and a new silence. Or maybe another beginning.